When people talk about a Patrice Lumumba or a Kwame Nkrumah, for example, or Thomas Sankara, or even Sukarno, they always say that they were ahead of their time. But that's not true. They weren't ahead of their time. They were not revolutionary thinkers, if you know what I mean. They were just incredibly astute, mature, sensible men with a very crystal clear understanding about how things should be. There was nothing futuristic or utopian in their visions. They just understood and identified exactly what had been done to Africa and what was being done to Africa. And they understood exactly what liberation and what sovereignty required. If they had been leaders in the West, no one would have called them revolutionary or even visionary. They just would have been regarded as logical, sound, rational, reasonable men who had an intricate understanding of economics and politics and basic fairness. I'm not saying this to slight them, not at all. I'm saying this to emphasize the heinous criminality of the Western power structure and how it has dealt with Africa. Because if you were a leader in Africa in the 1950s, the 1960s, the 70s, or the 80s, and you had a sound mind, a rational mind, you had an understanding of politics and economics, and you had an understanding of what's required for sovereignty and fairness, well, that made you a revolutionary, calling for, pursuing basic fairness and sovereignty and independence for an African leader, saying things and doing things and implementing policies that just made sense for your nation, constituted rebellion. No, they weren't ahead of their time. Time refused to advance. Time was being held back, especially in Africa. The West, Europe, the UK, and America refused to allow Africa to exist in the present day. Not just Africa, of course, all across the global South. But nowhere was this more the case than in Africa. You understand? I pointed out before, more than once, relationships between countries, between continents, evolve and develop and change over time. We've seen drastic changes in international relationships in just the last 20 years. In fact, we've seen drastic changes in just the last 4 or 5 years. Even the last 100 days, to be honest. But the West's relationship with Africa has remained essentially the same for 1,000 years. Subjugation and extraction, looting and pillage. So for Lumumba or Nkrumah, it was the 1960s, but for the West, it was still the 1860s, the 1760s, the 1660s. For the West, Africa was frozen in time, and they kept it frozen in time by force. They kept it frozen in time by violence, by assassination, by coups, by invasions, and by hostage governments and collaborators. They kept it frozen in time by predatory lending, by neoliberal policy coercion, by manufactured debt and abusive trade policies. When they can't send soldiers, they send consultants. So no, those great leaders weren't ahead of their time. The West stopped time in Africa. And understand this, when you arrest the forward movement of a people, when you stop them in time like that, you're not just stealing their wealth, you're stealing their future. You're robbing them of possibility. You're burying generations that have not even been born yet under the rubble of your exploitation. Because what could have been created, what could have been discovered, what could have been achieved, it never gets a chance to exist. The mind of Thomas Sankara, the determination of Patrice Lumumba, the vision of Nkrumah, these weren't anomalies. They're the normal, natural, healthy state of a decolonized mind, of a liberated mind coming from a liberated people. They're examples of what Africa would have been, should have been, and inshallah bi'idhnillah still will be. But the West systematically crushed the conditions necessary even for normalcy to flourish. You see, you don't just kill the leaders when you kill the leaders or when you overthrow the leaders. You steal the future that those leaders could build. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran that when you kill one person unjustly, it's as if you killed all of mankind. Well, that isn't just metaphorically true. In the case of the leaders that the West has destroyed in Africa, they also destroyed millions of lives along with them. Millions of living and unborn lives have been destroyed in terms of their hopes, their opportunities, their rights, their freedom, their independence, their sovereignty. Well, you can trace the carnage going on right now in Congo today. all the way back to the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. They assassinate the idea. They assassinate the man who represents the idea, so that future generations will look back and go, well, you know, they tried and they failed, so we better not bother. It's psychological warfare across time. Because if you can make a people believe that liberation is impossible, if you can make them believe that wanting sovereignty is naive and that dignity is an unrealistic hope, then you don't even have to conquer them anymore. They'll remain conquered inside themselves. And please understand, when we talk about people like Sankara, Nkrumah, Lumumba, Sukarno, we're actually just talking about the natural state of a decolonized mind. We're not talking about something extraordinary. We're talking about what's supposed to be normal, not exceptional, normal. They didn't have utopian visions for their countries. Like I said, they wanted their countries to be normal. But the West would not allow it. And back then, the West had the power to prevent it. The relative power, that's the key point. They had the relative power to prevent it. They had the relative power to steal Africa's future by prolonging its past by force. But as I've talked about many times, the West's relative power is receding. That old wolf still has fangs, but the global South is raising some young lions of their own today. They're reviving the spirit of Lumumba and Sankara and Nkrumah. Your grip on Africa is being pried open. And yes, of course, I'm talking about Ibrahim Traore.
What do you really think about it? Do you think Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, Kwame Nkrumah, and those great leaders we had in Africa, do you think they were ahead of their time? What do you think? Tell me in the comment section, what do you think about it? Because when people say that these leaders were ahead of their time, that means Africa was behind, yeah? That they were not supposed to come up, or rather, they were not supposed to show out what they thought about Africa. They were not supposed to bring out their view of how Africa should be at that time. That means they were ahead of their time. Is it them who were ahead of the time, or is it Africa that was back in time? I think Africa was back in time. According to Shahid Bolsen, Africa was back in time. And the reason as to why Africa was back in time, it's because Africa was fashioned to be back in time. That is what I think, and that is what it is. When colonizers came to Africa, they made Africa stay back in time so that Africa cannot be able to be at par with them, to be at the same level with them. Yeah, it is something that they planned. It is something they wanted it to be that way. Okay, so Africa was supposed, it was fashioned to be back in time so that we cannot be able to understand when we are being humiliated, so that we cannot be able to understand, or we cannot be able to resist when we are being treated bad, when we are being treated unfairly, when they are exploiting our resources, when they are taking everything that they're taking from Africa. Because if we would be ahead of time, or rather if we would be at an equal level with time, we would not allow it to happen. And even today, yes, the existing generation now is trying to run with time. The existing generation is trying to actually maybe reduce the gap between them and time, but still we are back in time, because that is what was made. That is what was intended for an African individual. That is what was intended for an African person or for a black person. Yeah, and that is why you will realize that the people who had a privilege of going to the United States of America during the times of slavery, they were at par with time. They were not back in time, because now that they were living together with them, yeah, in these Europe countries, it was very difficult for them to be pushed back in time, because everything that is happening there, they have an experience of it. But those who were in Africa, those who are living in Africa, it was easy for them to keep on staying back in time, because even when they say they've given us freedom and independence, it was just the purported freedom, purported independence. yeah, it wasn't the real independence and the real freedom. Colonization is still going on in Africa, an invisible colonization. I say that every day. That is what is going on in Africa even today. Yeah. Therefore, people like Thomas Sankara, when they came out, people like Patrice Lumumba, when they came out, these are just people who were geniuses, and they were ahead of time that was made for Africa. Africans were back in time because we were pushed back. When they came to Africa, they took everything away from us. They were trying to make us look like, to make us poor and all that, while they were taking our wealth and the riches to their countries, so that Africa will be back in time, so that even if we try to run with time, we cannot be able to capture them, because they took everything that belongs to us. We had to start from zero. Yeah, we were at maybe 30% when they were coming, but they took the 30% progress we had, leaving us with about 5%. So by the time we are going to start from 5% to get to the 30% where we are, proceeding to 100%, they were already far. That is what they did. Yeah. But people like Patrice Lumumba and those great leaders who came out, leaders like the likes of Muammar Gaddafi, when they came out, these are just leaders who were ahead of time, or they were at par with time. And when they were rising, they felt like, this is what we are supposed to do for us to be at par with these Europe countries and these developing countries. Yeah, that is why they were eliminated, because they never wanted an African person or a black person to be able to realize that we are back in time, and therefore we are supposed to be at a certain time where we can be able to argue with them, where we can be able to fight with them, where we can be able to run with them, where we can be able to actually compete with them. I want you to listen to Shahid Bolsen until he finishes his speech. Don't skip. Listen to his speech to the end, and then I'll come back and talk about it.
In Burkina Faso, and all the leaders in the Sahel Alliance countries, obviously, but especially Ibrahim Traore. It's often only in retrospect that we recognize the magnitude of a figure who shifts the course of history. It shifts the course of events in the world. But if anyone's paying attention, you can all see that Ibrahim Traore is clearly one of the most consequential leaders, not just in Africa, not just in the Muslim world, but in the entire global South, and in fact, in the world. I said on X the other day that Ibrahim Traore is the most important Muslim leader in the world today. More than Erdogan, more than MBS, more than anyone else, because of what he represents. Of course, I had a lot of fake Pan-Africanists in my comment section getting mad about the fact that I was referring to Ibrahim Traore as a Muslim leader, because they only want to identify him exclusively as a black leader or as exclusively as an African leader. They don't want to acknowledge the fact that he is a Muslim, because in their CIA-produced Pan-Africanism, they're ready to exclude 500 million Africans from Africa. They're so propagandized in their mind by the CIA and by the intelligence that they think being African and being Muslim is a contradiction. They've fallen for the old divide and rule tactics of the colonizers. Their indoctrinated brains will short circuit over the inconvenient fact that the most admired and the most heroic leaders in Africa today are Muslims. In Burkina Faso, in Niger, in Senegal, even Naledi Pandor in South Africa is a Muslim, taking the Israel to the ICJ. Just because Ibrahim Traore doesn't wear his religion on his sleeve, and just because he doesn't taqwa signal, all the time like some so-called Islamists, you think we don't get to claim him as part of our ummah? We don't get to say that he's a Muslim leader, but he is a Muslim leader. He's an African leader who's a Muslim. And I'm sorry to tell you, but again, the fact of the matter is that the best leaders you have in Africa today are the ones who are Muslims. You can get mad about it all you want. You can say, why does Shahid have to bring up religion? Why do you have to bring religion into it? But that's just a way of gaslighting about the fact that you don't want religion to be brought into it. You want to keep religion out of it. No, Ibrahim Traore is fighting those Western-backed, Western-trained, Western-funded jihadi groups because he's a Muslim. Nobody has suffered more from those mercenaries than the Muslims have. Suffered more from their violence and suffered more from the warped image of Islam that spread by their violence. Now, when Ibrahim Traore stands up to those French and Ukrainian-backed psychopaths, he's standing up for real Islamic values, whether you like it or not, from the perspective of Middle Nation. from my perspective, from the prism through which we analyze the struggle for justice and sovereignty and dignity, Ibrahim Traore's emergence is nothing short of historic. I mean, alhamdulillah, we have many great Muslim leaders in the world today, despite what everyone says. We have great leaders, many. But in my opinion, Ibrahim Traore is the most important. Burkina Faso, the land they call it, the land of upright people, has again produced an upright man, not only for their country, not only for the Ummah, but for all of humanity. First, they gave us Thomas Sankara, who was a Catholic, but his life was extinguished before he could ever reach the full, before he could realize his vision. But today, in Ibrahim Traore, we see that vision revived and refined and aligned with the consciousness of Islam. We don't have any hesitation acknowledging Thomas Sankara. We're proud of anyone, regardless of their faith, who stands for justice. You know, there were many leaders, heroic leaders in the Global South, particularly in Latin America, who were inspired by the so-called liberation theology within the Catholic Church. Even if their own church hated them for it, we salute them. You know, even those with no faith, who genuinely struggle for the rights of their people, we salute them. It's a part of our faith, it's a part of our religion to appreciate those who genuinely stand for justice, even if we know that their vision is never going to be complete without Islam. So if you want to be proud of Ibrahim Traore because of just his skin color, go ahead. If you want to be proud of him because of his country or his continent of origin, go ahead. But we're proud of him because of his belief. He's our brother in belief. We're proud of him because of his faith. And anyone who wants to deny that or deny us that, well, you're just petty and foolish and ideologically shackled. Ibrahim Traore led a coup against a government that was subservient to its foreign masters. You know, there's been many, many coups across the continent, but usually those just replaced one neo-colonial agent with another, usually. But Ibrahim Traore is different. He's not just changing the government. He is uprooting the whole system of neo-colonial domination, and he's succeeding. He's understood what many people have failed to grasp, which is that independence is meaningless if you don't sever the control of the owners and controllers of global financialized capital. He's understood that security is a myth as long as it depends on the military patronage of your former colonizers. And he's understood that sovereignty is impossible under the shadow of Western tutelage. He's not merely a head of state. Ibrahim Traore is the revolutionary archetype of the 21st century. He was forged in the reality of Western-backed insurgency and Western economic warfare and propaganda. Because, you know, today the fight for freedom is not just waged by armies anymore, but by narratives and by resource policies and by alliances and by collective sovereignty. Traore has made the choice to look towards Russia and Turkey and towards other new centers of power in the multipolar world. That's strategic, not because they're perfect allies, but because he recognizes the necessity of breaking the Western stranglehold on Burkina Faso. This is pragmatism in service to principle. This again is the methodology of Middle Nation. It's engagement without submission, cooperation without subjugation. It's trade-offs without selling out. He also understands, crucially, that Africa's liberation cannot be rented from outside. It has to be rooted in the reclamation of Africa's own wealth. You know, his moves to exert control over Burkina Faso's gold, building indigenous defense capacity and food sovereignty, these aren't just political decisions. These are acts of civilizational self-respect. It's a declaration that Africa's children will no longer be bled dry for the enrichment of Western imperial capital. We see Ibrahim Traore as a brother, not simply because of his faith, but also because of his fight. Because he embodies the spirit of the Quranic guidance to stand firmly for justice, even if it is against your own selves, even if it is against those who are in power, and even if it is against the odds. Burkina Faso isn't just a battleground today for the Burkinabe people. It's the front line in a global struggle for liberation. What Ibrahim Traore is doing is echoing in the Sahel, in Niger, in Mali, across Africa, across the Ummah, across the global South, and across the world. Every oppressed people around the world can now look to Burkina Faso and to Ibrahim Traore and say liberation looks like it's actually possible. But obviously, the global order trembles at the prospect that anyone is going to follow his example. They're afraid of his courage and his clarity and his defiance in the face of Western power and Western threats, and they should be afraid of that. They should tremble because they know the jig is up. But we know that when they get scared, they get dangerous, and Ibrahim Traore is under severe threat. There's already been something like 20 attempts on his life since coming to power. They just stopped a coup from happening last week, organized by the Americans and by the French, right there in the French embassy. Because a free Africa is just something that that old wolf can't take. You know, they've been keeping Africa in the past for so long that they know that if they let Africa get away from them, then they're going to be the ones who are consigned to history. The chains that have been holding Africa down all this time are also the only things holding the West up. So now America has said that they want to arrest him. You know, they've already tried to take him out more than once, like I said. Now they're trying to smear him. They're trying to attack him. They sent the head of AFRICOM to the Ivory Coast a couple of days ago, which is a neighbor of Burkina Faso and which is known to have allegedly anyway participated in the killing of Thomas Sankara. Allegedly they participated in the coups or helped to organize the coups against coup attempts against Ibrahim Traore. And the Western sycophantic leader that was overthrown by Ibrahim Traore is in exile in the Ivory Coast right now. So they're getting ready for something. Understand, Ibrahim Traore isn't just fighting insurgents and militants in the desert. No, every time he has to meet with some Western diplomat or politician or ambassador, he's fighting that same enemy. They're just wearing a suit and tie and meeting in some conference room or some embassy somewhere. But it's the same enemy that he's fighting in the desert. He doesn't have a meeting with any Western official except it's a kind of combat. Imagine, the same ones that are smiling at you from across the table, those are the same ones who are also paying mercenaries to kill you. That's why there's going to be a continent-wide protest at the end of this month. I think it's on the 30th. And I really hope that we'll see activists fill the streets all around the world, not just in Africa. It's a demonstration in support of Ibrahim Traore, in support of Burkina Faso, and it's a protest against American and Western threats against him. And I really hope, wallahi, that we see massive numbers globally participating in this. Wallahi, I hope that even we'll see people of the Ivory Coast turn out for it. Listen, this is important. Burkina Faso is important. Ibrahim Traore is important for everyone, not just for Africans, not just for the Burkinabes. This isn't about idolizing the man. It's about understanding the importance of what he represents. And what he represents is a paradigmatic shift that the whole world needs. You understand me? The OCGFC have been on a path of power consolidation for decades, accumulating more and more power in fewer and fewer hands, and leaving almost nothing beyond their control. We are in a struggle against this consolidation. Do you understand? It's a struggle for decentralization. That's the essence of it. That's what multipolarity is. It's decentralization. We need to pursue, protect, and preserve variance. They don't want there to be any options. They don't want there to be any divergence, any independence. But see, they built their power structure initially on the assumption that American power would last forever. Now they're understanding that they have to recalibrate. They need to transition. It's like they built one of those Jenga towers on a kitchen table, and now they have to relocate it. They have to move that tower all the way across town without it falling apart. Because now you have to move to the global south. It's a completely different terrain than what they're used to. So they're going to try to eliminate as many variables as they can to try to manage this transition so they come out on the top. Because they don't want their tower to fall apart. But if their tower falls apart, that is liberatory for everyone on this planet. Burkina Faso, as I say, represents decentralization. It represents variance. It represents a threat to the power consolidation. They see Ibrahim Traore as a glitch in their system, but their system is a virus on humanity. Burkina Faso represents not only the promise of African liberation, but liberation for all of us. And the instinct for liberation is not a bug in the human software. It's a feature. So everyone should do whatever they can, and we should all do all we can to try to defend and protect Ibrahim Traore. Because wallahi, this is a matter of self-defense. Ibrahim Traore isn't simply a political figure. He's a turning point.
Thank you so much for watching. Now, we have listened to Shahid Bolsen. He has spoken about how Africa was pushed back. Yeah, it is not that when Africa was growing up, Africa was back in time. Everybody had their culture. And let me tell you something. We never depended on our Western culture for us to be where we are. Our Western culture was not supposed to be the culture that was going to actually make us grow. Western culture was not supposed to be the culture that Africans had to follow that culture to be a developed country or something like that. I think Africa had their culture. Yeah, and Western countries had their own cultures. Okay, our cultures were supposed to serve us as black people in our own way. For people to come out and say that the technology we are having right now has been brought by the Europe countries and Western countries, that's a lie. For someone to come out and say that if it were not by the Western countries, if it were not by the white people, I had someone saying white people brought good things to Africa. White people did not brought good things to Africa. It is only that white people came to Africa, they swiped our history, they swiped our culture, they took away everything that belongs to us just to leave us with no option than to follow what they say, than to live their life, than to live like them, than to walk like them, than to do things like them. They made themselves look like the saviors. They made themselves look like the people who, we needed to listen to them, who we needed to follow so that we can be able to be saved in case we are in a certain problem. Okay? Now, I want you to listen to me. Africa, if colonization would never have happened in Africa, right now as we are talking, Africa would have had its own kind of technologies. If it's about communication, a long time ago we used to communicate using the smoke, we used to communicate using the drums, we used to communicate using many other things. Yeah, people had to go a very long distance to go and spread, to take a message, or rather to go and maybe give a message to a certain village from this community. Maybe there's something happened to this community. You had to go to walk by foot or to run or to go miles away just to go and do what? And deliver a message from one community to another. Other people used to they used to use smoke. The use of smoke was used also. When there is something that has happened in a different community, you want to take a message to another community, a smoke used to be lit. Okay? So when someone from a far distance sees the smoke, definitely this person will know there is something that is happening to a neighboring community, and therefore they can be able to go there. Yeah? The use of drums. We used to beat drums whenever something has happened. When the other community hears the sound of the drum, they would come to this community because they would know something has actually happened to a certain community. Everything used to symbolize something. If there is a certain message, a certain means was to be used. That was during the time of our ancestors and all that. Even in Western countries, in Europe, they used to have their own cultures, how they used to spread the message and all that. The use of phones were not there. It is something they have advanced into it. And trust you me, if Africa would never have been colonized, we would not be using maybe the same things we are using as the Westerners. We would not be using maybe the same way of communication, the same way of transportation and all that with the Westerners, or rather with the Europe countries. Yeah? As far as I am concerned, the biggest technology, as far as I am concerned, the people who can come up with the technology like no other are black people and Africans. The fact that we have not seen in books black people having a certain kind of technology, like this fact that we haven't seen black people in books with inventions, does not mean black people have the potential and the capability to actually invent things. It's because black people have been limited. We have had an opportunity where black people invented a lot of things. But after they invented it, they were not allowed to come to the limelight. They were blocked from coming to the limelight because people, especially the white people, did not want the world, the global, to know that black people can also do great things. Black people have been limited from doing a lot of things. It's not that black people don't have the potential to be able to do things that are happening, or that to be able to come up with the greatest inventions. But it's because black people have been limited from from exposing their inventions and all that. Take a look of a recent the story that came up of Maxwell Chikumbutso from Zimbabwe. Maxwell Chikumbutso was able to invent a car that can only move by the use of radio waves. Yeah? But Maxwell Chikumbutso was about to be unalived when he was in the United States of America, simply because he came up with this kind of an invention. Yeah? Because black people cannot be allowed to come up. And that is why when Ibrahim Traore came, he said that we really need to start doing our own inventions here in Africa. Our children and our youths should not go to the United States of America or abroad in search of education, in search of green pastures and all that, because when they go there, they don't come back to Africa. The fact that they do not come back to Africa, it means their great minds that they took to the US or to Europe, it means that they are going to use that great minds to build Europe countries. They're going to use that great minds to build those countries. Okay? And Africa will remain stuck. Yeah? Africa will not be able to do what? Will not be able to move. So, we have many people. I've had a story where black people used to come up with inventions, but when it comes to writing those inventions and the people who invented them, black people were placed in a black site where they cannot be seen, where they cannot be understood. Even in Africa, we've had books that are reading, books that have been written about the inventions of many things in our physics books, in our chemistry books and biology books, but there is nowhere where you will walk around or where you will read and find a black person has invented a certain thing. They are only white people. Dr. David Livingstone, Ludwig Kraft, even the people who discovered things. He discovered this, a white person. The person who discovered this, a white person. We have even white people who have been able to discover the physical features that are found in Africa. I saw a picture where black people were carrying, I don't know if it was Ludwig Kraft or someone, I don't know, I've forgotten, but I saw them carrying a white man to go to Mount Kenya to go and discover Mount Kenya. Like black people are carrying a white person on something, they are breaching him from the water. They are carrying him to go and discover Mount Kenya. I'm like, how can you discover something that was there? We as Kenyans, or we as black people in Kenya, we have been there. We pass there every day. We live around Mount Kenya. But you come from Europe to come and discover something that is a physical feature that is in Kenya. Yeah? And that is how black people were pushed back in time. Black people were not given an opportunity to be able to come up with their own things. They were not given an opportunity to be able to build their own countries. They were not given an opportunity to be able to develop their own countries. They were not given an opportunity to be able to advance their cultures and all that. Because everything we're having right now is just an advancement of the culture. Maybe even black people would be the people with the best and unique culture, unique advanced culture or advanced technology in this world if they would have been given an opportunity to sit down and do their own things by themselves. That is how black people were pushed back in time. So when we are now running with time to be able to be at par with time with the existing generation that is right now, because the existing generation right now is the generation that is trying to run to make sure we are beating time, or rather we are at par with time. So this moment that we are running to be able to be at par with time, we will realize that when we be at par with time, the only culture we can see is the Western culture. The only technology we can be able to see is a Western technology. Even if we want to build, or to advance, we shall have to advance from a Western technology, or rather from a Western culture going forward. Are you getting my point? Because that is the existing technology and the existing culture that is there. Our cultures were wiped away. The history of a black person was hidden. If a black person would be able to be given his history, or if a black person would have been given an opportunity to be able to see his own history, to read his own history, we would have been able, to know where we can start from. But the reason that our history has been hidden from us and it has not been disclosed from us shows that our history was greater than their history. And they do not want us to know our history, because if we know our history, even today, we can be able to even beat them 1,000 times. That's why I tell you every day, Africa is a land that was blessed by God. And Africans, and black people in particular, they are the chosen generation because they are people who are blessed by God. We've had history. We've seen stories where Jesus was a black, Jesus Christ was black, and all those history and all that. But we have been fed with the narrative that Jesus Christ was white. We are serving the white Jesus. Even the pictures of Jesus Christ was white. According to what we are seeing right now. If you walk around, you will realize that we have a white Jesus everywhere. Have you come across a black Jesus? It's only the existing generation that is trying to dig out and coming out with the pictures of white Jesus and all that, of black Jesus and all that. The first and the original Bible, according to history, it was from Ethiopia. But have we ever been taught about that? We have not been taught about that. Because the history that they knew, this history will come one day and help these people and make these people look greater than us. All that history was hidden from a black person. And that is how we were pushed back in time. That is how we were pushed back in time. So, when we are trying to beat time, we are coming to the if it's about technology, we are coming to land on the technology of a white man, a Western technology. We are coming to land on the Western culture. That is where we are coming to land, because our own culture was destroyed. So people who tried to come at an early time in the years of 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, the likes of Thomas Sankara, the likes of Kwame Nkrumah, the likes of Patrice Lumumba, they were eliminated. Why? Because these people were trying to open the eyes of black people. They were trying to open the eyes of Africans. They were trying to show Africans that we are back in time. We are supposed to be at this point. This is where we're supposed to be. But because the Westerners did not want that to happen, they had to take them out. And that is why you will realize, even today, we are having leaders like Capt.Ibrahim Traore who have come up, because Capt.Ibrahim Traore is just like a reincarnation of Thomas Sankara, who is also ahead of time, of an African time where we were placed. That is why they are looking forward to eliminate him. They are looking forward to assassinate him, because they do not want an African individual to be ahead of time. Because even if we have now to start with the Western technology, we are definitely going to beat them, because they might have taken the culture away from us. They might have taken our technology away from us. They might have taken everything that belongs to us. They might have taken the history that belongs to us, but they have not taken the knowledge, the intelligence, the brain that we have as black people. They might have taken everything, but there are things they have not taken. Are we together? So the brain, we still have it, because it is something we were created with. If you go to US right now, people who have built the United States of America are black people. They've worked so much to build the US. And that is why you find out some other black people, it's very difficult for them to come out of the United States of America, because they are looking back at what they've been able to do in the US, and they feel like, am I supposed to go back to Africa after doing all this to this country? Am I supposed to go back? I am telling you, without black people, the whites cannot be able to survive on their own. They have to associate themselves with black people for them to be able to survive. They have to associate themselves with black people for them to be able to live a better life. And that is why if you ask white people to get rid of Africa, they cannot be able to get rid of Africa because their existence is as a result of them associating themselves with an African individual or with an African continent. Everything they have, the wealth, the riches, is as a result of them associating themselves with Africa. That is why when you walk around, you'll find out that we have their military bases in Africa. We have like what in Africa. They have really been to Africa. That is why when you go to South Africa, the Afrikaners are in South Africa. Donald Trump have given them an opportunity to go to the US, to get rid of South Africa and go back to the US. But many of them cannot get out of South Africa. Why can't they get out of South Africa? Because in South Africa is where, they have the fertile land. They're getting food from South Africa. They're getting everything from South Africa. The land where they're planting their crops, they're doing farming in South Africa. And when they go to the United States of America, they might not be able to get the lands they have in South Africa that it can be able to produce for them the good, fertile, and natural foods that they're getting out of South Africa. They can't get out of Africa because it's only in Africa where you can get things you cannot get in other continents in this world. Africa is a blessed land. And that is why we were pushed back in time. Because even after we get colonized and get exploited to that extent, Africa is still beautiful. Walk around Africa. You will see how beautiful Africa is. I played for you a video where I was able to show you Africa, how Africa looks like. When you walk around Africa, Africa is beautiful, very beautiful. But remember, Africa is beautiful. Africa is still rich. Even after being exploited for all those years, still Africa can be rich. We have been exploited for the last 60 years, after independence. And before the counting of 60 years, back then, we were still being exploited. In fact, that is the time that we are being exploited more than we are being exploited right now. So we have been exploited for more than 100 years, for more than 150 years, but still Africa can be able to look the way it's looking. If Africa would not be a blessed land, it means Africa right now would have been a poor continent, a very poor continent that nobody would even want to live in. But still Africa is rich, even after being exploited for all those years. That means Africa is a blessed land, and Africa can never be poor. So they knew this, they understood this, and therefore they wanted to do that, put us back in time so that we cannot be able to defeat them. They wanted to be the image of the world. But even after that, we are still standing. We are still rich. The wealthiest continent is still Africa. It's only that we are trying to run and get ahead of time. The moment we are there, we will surely rise. With leaders like Capt.Ibrahim Traore, with leaders like Abdurrahman Chiani and Assimi Goita, and many other leaders who have come up for the revolution and freedom of Africa, we are able to be where we want to be. Tell me what you think of the comment section about this. I'll do my best to make sure I read all the comments and give a response where possible. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for making this channel your stopover today. You are the greatest people that I really appreciate so much. I love you so much wherever you are, in whatever the things you are doing. God bless you, and God bless you so much. If it's your first time to be here, do not forget to subscribe. Consider subscribing to this channel. That's the only way you can help me. For the returning subscribers, I do as I do always. I salute you. God bless.